It's July 21st here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with North Korea's warning over the U.S. nuclear submarine docked in Busan. The regime has threatened that the USS Kentucky's visit to South Korea may meet the conditions for a nuclear weapons use. Calling the rhetoric extremely dangerous, the U.S. has made clear the visit reflects its ironclad commitment to the Korean Peninsula. 7 clusters have been named as high-tech zones in South Korea to cultivate and foster leading roles in chips, secondary batteries, and displays globally. Ukraine's southern city of Odesa suffered a sustained Russian bombardment for 3 straight nights, and the U.S. slaps sanctions on more Russians and Russian firms to cut the financing of weapons production. Another warning from the North over the USS Kentucky. North Korea says the U.S. nuclear-capable submarine's visit to South Korea could give the North a legitimate reason to use nuclear weapons. Our Lee Soo-jin starts us off.
North Korea has heavily criticized the docking of the USS Kentucky, a nuclear-capable strategic submarine in South Korea, and the launch of the South Korea-U.S. Nuclear Consultative Group as a blatant and direct nuclear threat. North Korea's Defense Minister Kang Sun-nam, in a press statement released by North Korea's state-run Korea Central News Agency, called the situation the most serious stage of the U.S. planning and executing a nuclear strike against DPRK. He added that the DPRK's law on nuclear force allows them to take a necessary course of action when it is clear that a nuclear weapons attack on the country has been carried out or is imminent. Kang emphasized that the deployment of strategic weapons such as the nuclear-capable submarine falls under the conditions of North Korea's nuclear doctrine that allows the use of nuclear weapons in retaliation. He also said that using military force against North Korea will lead to disastrous consequences for both South Korea and the United States. The USS Kentucky arrived in the southeastern port city of Busan on Tuesday, the first port call from a U.S. ballistic missile submarine in Korea in 40 years. On the same day, the first meeting of the South Korea-U.S. Nuclear Consultative Group was held in Seoul. The Pentagon responded to the statement saying that the submarine's port call to Busan was a planned military exercise stemming from South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol's visit to Washington in April, emphasizing that the move was part of its commitment to extended deterrence in response to North Korea's continued nuclear threats. The port visit was also referred to as a representation of South Korea and the U.S.'s ironclad commitment to defense. The Pentagon also said that South Korea and the U.S.'s efforts to protect their citizens from North Korean nuclear threats do not violate UN Security Council resolutions, unlike North Korea's nuclear provocations. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
And ahead of the North's latest warning, top nuclear envoys of South Korea, the U.S. and Japan sat down in Tokyo. There they once again vowed stronger cooperation to cut off illicit funding for the regime's missile programs. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji reports.
South Korea's top nuclear envoy Kim Gov't has highlighted the need to strengthen trilateral cooperation between the U.S. and Japan to cut off illicit funding for North Korea's ballistic missile and weapons programs. He said this while holding a trilateral meeting in Tokyo on Thursday afternoon with his American and Japanese counterparts, Sung Kim and Takehiro Funakoshi. Noting that Kim Jong-un has reached a dead end, Kim Gov't said that at the top of their list is repatriating overseas North Korean workers and clamping down on malicious cyber activities. He also added that they will look for further action that can be taken to close the loopholes in the sanctions that are placed on North Korea, and said they're still open to talks.
We will strengthen our close communication and coordination to bring North Korea back to the path to denuclearization.
The U.S. nuclear envoy also said Washington remains committed to achieving denuclearization.
Our security commitments to our allies and partners are ironclad and unwavering, and we will continue to take steps to demonstrate our commitment to extended deterrence.
The 3 officials last met in person in Seoul this April. Thursday's meeting comes a day after North Korea fired 2 short-range ballistic missiles in an apparent protest against the arrival of an American nuclear ballistic missile submarine in South Korea, with the new Seoul-Washington security dialogue taking place for the first time on Tuesday. The regime also launched a solid fuel ICBM last Wednesday. The talks also come at a sensitive time after an American service member crossed the inter-Korean border into North Korea, fleeing before being sent back home to face military discipline. 배은지, Arirang News.
Washington is continuing to work to secure the safe return of the U.S. soldier who defected to North Korea earlier this week, and no official word from the North yet. U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller said on Thursday the White House, the Pentagon, and South Korean authorities are all working together for information on the whereabouts and well-being of Travis King. The spokesperson declined to comment on whether North Korea had at least acknowledged receiving U.S. messages sent through available communication channels. The Kremlin has targeted the southern Ukrainian city of Odesa for 3 consecutive nights. Ukraine has struggled to defend itself, blaming less advanced defense systems used in the south. Lee Seung-ja has more.
Ukraine is struggling to defend its southern city of Odesa following 3 consecutive nights of attacks. According to Ukrainian Air Force, it destroyed just 5 of 19 cruise missiles overnight into Thursday, a far lower success rate compared to previous attacks targeting Kyiv. Ukrainian officials say it's due to less advanced defense systems operating in the southern regions of the country. The Russian Defense Ministry says these strikes were retaliation for the Ukraine's attack on the Crimean Bridge earlier this week, adding it targeted facilities linked with Ukraine's seaborne attack drones. However, Ukraine has refuted the claims, saying Moscow is targeting civilian infrastructure associated with grain exports, especially as it refused to renew its grains export agreement on Monday. Among the buildings damaged in the attack on Odesa was the Chinese Consulate General. A Ukrainian Foreign Ministry spokesperson said it's assessing the extent of the damage and offering any assistance needed. And according to UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has strongly condemned the sustained attack on Odesa. The spokesperson added that the attacks have consequences well beyond Ukraine, as a negative impact on global wheat and corn prices is already being seen. Meanwhile, the U.S. sanctioned more than 120 Russian and Kyrgyzstan firms on Thursday for what it said were their contributions to Russia's war on Ukraine. The U.S. State Department said the latest move would further cut off Russia's access to critical raw and manufactured materials, which finance the production of weapons. Also included in the list of those sanctioned is a North Korean who supported the Wagner group by helping with the shipping of weapons to the mercenary group. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Many regions across the globe are feeling the impact of extreme weather, from torrential downpours to extreme heat waves. Now, what's behind the unsettled and at times severe weather patterns that we've been seeing in the past years? To answer the question, we're joined by Professor Jung So-young from Korea University this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
South Korea was enveloped by torrential downpours this past week. I'm sure you're pretty aware of that, but so were Japan and India. What's behind this unusual extreme rain?
Well, it requires some of the understanding about the scientific factors, actually. So starting with climate change, right? We all know that the climate change is a very serious problem now, and that causes the sort of the increase of the water temperature in the Pacific Ocean around the aquatic area, and then simply increasing 0.5 degree for 5 months, and it will cause not only the temperature increase, also change the currents on the ocean. So we call it as El Nino, right? And El Nino also brings us to the Korean Peninsula by bringing more humid, and then also which contains the more vapors, and then which will form a strong high pressure. And then at the same time that we have cold pressure coming from the north, but because of the the temperature increase in the northern atmosphere, then this the pressure actually has weakened weakened, which contains the cold one. So in the end, at this time in Korean Peninsula, it comes with like a very heavy rainfall. We call it as atmospheric river. So it sounds like it contains almost all the river water, and that pours the heavy rains in the Korean Peninsula that we have been suffering from these days.
Sure, increased in water temperatures and also change in currents leading up to the phenomenon known as El Nino.
Right.
But in the meantime, the other side of the world is experiencing a completely different weather situation, right? The US and parts of Europe are under extreme heat waves. Now, the state of Arizona recording 48 degrees Celsius in the past week. What's happening over there?
Well, actually, today in Seoul, where I am, actually we started to have actually very heat wave already in the morning. Actually, that also happens everywhere, not exceptionally in Europe and the United States, and that's also related to what I have partially described about. Actually, the increased temperature in the Earth actually changes the sort of the patterns of the pressures. We have high pressures and low pressures, but because of the temperature increase, we tend to have a very strong jet stream in the northern hemisphere, which has been weakened. And then that has helped actually high pressure form the stronger formation than before. Actually, high pressure attracts more sunshine to the atmosphere, and then that helps us, actually brings us the more heat waves, a lot more than before. And then unless we address climate change, actually this pattern will only increase as time goes by.
Sure. In the meantime, the U.S. Special Climate Envoy John Kerry visited China this week to reestablish climate agreements between the U.S. and China. Now, no fresh agreements there. Why is it so hard to get China involved in the fight against climate change? I mean, why does it matter so much that China plays an active role?
Well, based on the science understanding that I briefly explained about, and then it sounds like it's necessary for all the countries to get united and orchestrated to fight against the climate change. However, all different countries have also their own interest-based way of thinking. We sometimes call it as a national interest-based approach. And then these days, especially because of some of the formation of the new, sort of the political, possibly confrontation between the U.S. and EU-led group versus China and the Russia-led group, and that has actually prevented very severe barriers in terms of the fighting against climate change as one single group. So I do hope that John Kerry's visit will help China to better understand, even if there are some differences in the political and economic matters, but this one, the climate change issues, should be addressed as one single actor, in the sense that I do hope that China will be persuaded enough to come back to the talk on the climate change once again.
Right. That's why it is important to separate diplomacy from the fight against climate change, as they are two different topics. And climate change is something that we all are facing as a global challenge.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, experts around the world warn climate change may only worsen the situation and result in even more extreme weather conditions in the coming years. Now, what actions, Professor, do you suggest we should implement and promote here in South Korea and around the world so that we can maybe prevent or at least slow climate change?
Well, we need to increase the ambition to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by every country. Here in Korea, I think the current administration is doing its own efforts to do so, but I do hope that we will strengthen more sort of the control tower within the president's office so that the different ministries can be united actually under the same goal of fighting against the climate change. To do so, we have to maintain every effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions so that we can maintain the goal that we voluntarily set That's a 40% reduction in 2030 as planned. And then during that time that we can deploy all these different low carbon and carbon neutral technologies that will also help us to create new jobs. So, fighting against climate change is not only about the matter of survival, but in the end, it can be a very good chance for us to create new jobs during the process of this very important endeavor together with other countries.
Sure. Thanks so much for your insight this morning, Professor Zhang. You have a good day.
All right, you too. Thank you.
Seven regions in South Korea have been designated as special clusters for national advanced strategic industries, with hopes that the move makes the country's grip on global technology like chips even firmer. Our Lee Si-hoo reports.
The government has designated 7 regions across the country as what it calls special clusters for national advanced strategic industries to foster the growth of cutting-edge technologies and into which it will invest 614 trillion Korean won, or around 483 billion US dollars. The announcement was made by the Office for Government Policy Coordination after being finalized at a related committee meeting presided over by Prime Minister Han Duck-soo.
The South Korean government will give all directional support for these special clusters to become global innovation areas with internationally overpowering production capacity.
The designated clusters are Yongin and Pyeongtaek in Gyeonggi-do Province, Gumi and Pohang both in Gyeongsang-buk-do Province, Cheonan and Asan in Chungcheongnam-do Province, Cheongju in Chungcheongbuk-do Province, the Saemangeum Coastal Region in Jeollabuk-do Province, and Ulsan Metropolitan City. 21 regions applied for the government designation and support, but only the 7 were selected, based on criteria such as the presence of innovative enterprises in the region, investment plans, and potential for growth. The clusters will focus on advancing technologies in semiconductors, displays, and rechargeable batteries, among others. The special clusters will receive, quote, a comprehensive support package, such as expedited government approvals, tax benefits, and budgetary support. Additionally, in the second half of the year, a pan-ministry council will be formed to provide a one-stop support service for the clusters. Meanwhile, the government also selected 8 universities, including Seoul National and Sungkyunkwan, to advance the cutting-edge technology required by these industrial clusters. To support them, the government is going to invest 54 billion Korean won to set up interdisciplinary curriculums and recruit talented teaching professionals. These moves follow a promise made by President Yoon Suk-yeol at an emergency meeting on the economy back in March.
오늘 발표된 국가 첨단 산업단지 조성이 신속하게 추진될 수 있도록 정부는 모든 노력을 다하겠습니다.
The government is also looking to expand the list of universities that it will support as it seeks to foster qualified talent that industries are looking for. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
MySpace, Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and now Threads. Will this new service be a wind of change in the social media ecosystem, or is it going to end up being a fad? Our Lee Dae-han reports.
We've seen one of the fastest sign-up rates for a social media app. It's Threads. While not social media, if we take ChatGPT as an example, it took 2 months to reach 100 million accounts. Threads reached that in less than a week. According to South Korean real-time data service WhatsApp, more than 1 million people in South Korea signed up for Threads within 5 days of its launch. Threads is a text-based social network service that resembles Twitter. The app was built by the company that owns Facebook and Instagram, Meta, which means users can link the 2 social media apps, making it very easy for the 2 billion Instagram users to open a Threads account. Meta even said Threads will be, quote, powered by Instagram. And some recent controversial decisions made by Twitter and its owner Elon Musk have triggered some users to migrate to other apps, including Threads. In March, Twitter launched a new monthly and annually paid subscription service. Users also now need to pay to have a blue verification tick. So you have to pay to use Twitter without restrictions, as it limits you to read 1,000 posts a day for free.
This seems very timely, and I'm sure they've been working on it for quite some time, but this was perfect timing. with just the latest sort of little fiasco on Twitter with Musk rate limiting users and all that stuff. So yeah, the timing was perfect, and so it's not too much of a surprise, as expected in a way. Yeah.
A lawyer for Twitter, Alex Spiro, sent a letter to Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg accusing the company of engaging in, quote, systematic, willful, and unlawful misappropriation of Twitter's trade secrets and other intellectual property, demanding that, quote, Meta take immediate steps to stop using any Twitter trade secrets or other highly confidential information. But we might want to keep an eye on whether to find out if the arrival of Threads means the end of Twitter. Threads has not been released in Europe yet due to the Digital Markets Act, which bans U.S. big tech companies from dominating the European market. But there is a high possibility, experts say, that the service will be introduced there in a very short time. However, we have already seen that some new social media services come and go rather rapidly. For instance, Apple's Clubhouse, where people could communicate in audio chat rooms, went viral in the pandemic era. But with some social media services, the novelty wears off. As for Threads, users have complained that the app drains their batteries, so it still has some things to overcome to become a major player in the market. Lee Dae-hyun, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Ashley, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin in Belarus, as its defense ministry on Thursday confirmed that fighters from the Wagner mercenary group have begun training Belarusian special forces. Now, the training is taking place at the Brest military range, just 5 kilometers from the border of NATO member Poland. The announcement comes a day after a video was released, appearing to show the mercenary group leader Yevgeny Prigozhin in Belarus, welcoming Wagner fighters. Now, Poland, meanwhile, has increased defenses on its side of the border since the start of July, adding over 1,000 troops. And its defense ministry says it's ready for various scenarios. Now, Russia has called Poland's move to up its border defense aggressive and a cause for concern. Iraq on Thursday expelled the Swedish ambassador in Baghdad over a diplomatic dispute involving the burning of the Quran in Stockholm. Iraq also recalled its charge d'affaires in Sweden and suspended businesses with Swedish companies. Now, hours earlier, Iraqi protesters stormed the Swedish embassy and set its compound alight. This comes after Swedish courts, under the right of freedom to assembly, gave permission to anti-Islam protesters on Thursday to burn the Quran for a second time outside the Iraqi embassy in Stockholm. However, protesters this time did not torch the book, but kicked and stamped on it. Protesters had previously burnt the Quran outside Stockholm's main mosque in June. Now, moving over to Germany, a lioness is reportedly on the loose on the outskirts of Berlin. Residents in nearby neighborhoods have been warned to stay in their homes. According to German authorities, an emergency call on Wednesday midnight informed them of a wild animal in the Kleinmachnow neighborhood. After assessing footage taken and sent by the caller, authorities said it's likely a lion. Hunters, vets, helicopters and thermal cameras are being used in the search, and police have asked that pets be brought indoors for safety. It's not known where the animal escaped from, as no zoos, animal centers or circuses have reported a missing lion. And finally, martial arts fans gathered at Hong Kong's Victoria Harbour on Thursday to mark the 50th anniversary of Bruce Lee's death. Meeting in front of a statue of the martial arts master, fans paid their respects and could be seen practicing his signature moves. Born as Lee Jun-fan in San Francisco in 1940, Lee was raised in Hong Kong. He got his start as a child actor and started learning kung fu when he was 13. He was best known in the 1960s and 70s for his martial arts talent and for fighting racist portrayals of Asians on screen. Lee died in 1973 from an allergic reaction to painkillers when he was 32. His death came just 6 days before the release of his most popular movie, Enter the Dragon.
Good morning. It's Jungbok today, which is supposed to be the peak of the summer heat. And living up to its name, most of Korea will experience another sweltering day with heat alerts being in place. Seoul could see a high of 34 degrees Celsius this afternoon. And there will be passing rains of 5 to 40 millimeters in most inland areas. So please have a small umbrella handy in case of sudden showers. Sunny skies will beam down, boosting UV rays to very high levels on this blistering Jungbok day. Daejeon sees a high of 34, Daegu and Gwangju at 33 degrees. Meanwhile, Jeju will see monsoon rain returning late tonight. It will rain heavily on Jeju tomorrow. Then on Sunday, it looks like it will be pouring down in central parts of the country on Daeseol, the last summer season term, meaning big heat. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. Stay safe wherever you are.